Hello. This audio is to help with having a difficult conversation with someone. This conversation might be with a family member, a close friend, co-worker, boss, classmate, teacher, or even a romantic partner. Before we have this conversation, it might be helpful to organize our thoughts. Begin by writing your thoughts down with the reasons for having this conversation. Is this a concern you have about someone else? Are you setting a boundary? Are you clarifying your perspective? Maybe you are delivering difficult news. Whatever the reason is, it can be helpful to list out the purpose of an end goal of this conversation. It also might be helpful to think about listing out some key points you want to make. When we are emotional, which is often the case when having a difficult conversation, it can be hard to think clearly, so having a list of things you want to address can help ensure you make your point and achieve your goal. Next, let's explore why this conversation is difficult. Maybe you are worried about hurting someone else's feelings, or maybe you are worried about how they will respond. To help with finding the motivation to have this conversation, remind yourself of the potential cost of not having this conversation. What are the potential negative outcomes of waiting or choosing not to have this conversation? However, on the other hand, think about the potential positive outcomes of having this conversation. Maybe through this conversation, although initially stressful, you will feel less stressed in the end. Maybe your relationship with the other person will improve, or maybe you will have the chance to tell your side of the story. Another thing to think about that might be helpful is being an active listener. What are things you might be able to learn from hearing their perspective if they choose to share theirs? Ask with curiosity from their perspective. Make sure that the other person knows you acknowledge their perspective. Just because you don't agree with them doesn't mean that they don't feel the way they do for a reason. If appropriate, maybe there is a compromise that can be made. Be sure to speak from your perspective, experiences, and feelings. If the conversation begins to get too overwhelming or it leads to an argument, consider taking a break. And you can use this time to think over your points and their points. While having this conversation, if you notice any anxious feelings or nervousness, make sure to take some slow, deep breaths. Don't be afraid to refer to your notes from the beginning. And ultimately, having this conversation will be the first step towards being heard.